Greetings from the cosmic horror. The stars are right once again, and the great old ones are allowing us to talk about for 30 plus minutes H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer who is a genre unto himself. I am your cosmic host, Mark Griffin, executor of the Lovecraft estate on Yagath, and whom has recovered from a Cthulhu in the throat. I'm joined by two from Material World, David Guffey, professor at Mispatawk University, and Richard Wilson, who has a hard time telling Conan the Barbarian and Conan O'Brien apart.
You'd be surprised how many Google searches get mixed up.
Today's guest is Bill Indy Cavalier, official editor for the Robert E. Howard United Press Association, and serves on the board of directors of the Robert E. Howard Foundation. He is also one of the founders of the Robert E. Howard Days. And in case you don't know, Howard is best known as being the creator of the Conan the Barbarian. And so welcome, Bill Cavalier.
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Do you prefer to be called Bill, Indy, or Mr. Cavalier?
Well, Indy would be fine. That's my nickname, and that came to me via my Robert E. Howard friends. So you can call me Indy. We're all friendly here.
All right. Okay. All right. You were not originally a fan of Conan. You started off being a fan of Mighty Mouse and Tarzan. Is that correct?
I did. Yeah. When I was a kid, actually, Mighty Mouse comics are what started it all for me, because I like the Mighty Mouse cartoon show. I'm showing my age here, but I like the Mighty Mouse cartoon show, and my mom bought me Mighty Mouse comic books, and I always liked cartooning. I've always been a cartoonist, and I decided I kind of wanted to figure out what those little words were that were connected to the cartoons, and Mighty Mouse helped me to read, or learn how to read. So that was, and from Mighty Mouse, I progressed to Tarzan comic books, and from Tarzan comic books on to Tarzan novels, and that was pretty much my introduction into fandom.
And then you discovered Conan the Adventurer in 1966 at a paperback shelf section at Wilco Food Store in Gary, Indiana. And you first comic,
exactly
Tarzan.
Right. When I first discovered Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan books, well, I discovered other Edgar Rice Burroughs books too, and I became a fan of that. This was in the early 60s, around 1963, I believe. And I had to decide whether not to spend my comic book money on comics or on paperbacks. And 40 cents in those days was a whole lot for a 13-year-old to come up with. So but I graduated from the Tarzan comics to the Tarzan novels, and I liked them very much. And plus, the covers were pretty spectacular when you have guys like Roy Krinkle and Frank Frazetta doing the covers on those novels. And then one fateful day, I was perusing the paperback shelves at the grocery store, and it was a book called Conan the Adventurer, and that's got the iconic Frazetta Conan pose where he's standing on a pile of bodies with a sword stuck in the bodies, and there's a girl stuck on his leg, and I looked at that, and man, that was about it for me. I saw the cover and I went, "Whoa, what's this all about?" And I picked it up and I looked at it and I went, this looks pretty cool, and and lo and behold, they had a mention of Edgar Rice Burroughs on the inside cover, and they compared Robert E. Howard to Edgar Rice Burroughs. So I thought, well, I'll take a chance, and so I had to up the ante to 60 cents, which was, whoa, that was at that time, that was 5 comic books. So, and I took it home and I started reading it, and the first story in Conan the Adventurer, this is the Lancer series, is The People of the Black Circle, which coincidentally I just finished reading it again today, and that just it changed my outlook on who I wanted my literary hero to be, and the impact of Howard's writing was evident from right away, and I became a fan, and the Lancer started producing the Conan novels, and I started reading them, and I loved them. And it wasn't too long before Conan replaced Tarzan as my literary hero.
So what was it about Conan that you liked so much, especially over Tarzan?
Well, I've always liked the loner aspect of my heroes, where he's just like kind of like a cowboy, riding off to another adventure, and with Conan, it was because he was different than Tarzan. Tarzan was, for lack of a better phrase, Tarzan was a noble savage. He was a savage, and he was in a lot of ways a lot more savage than Conan ever could be, because he was raised in an animal setting. But I think Burroughs always made a mistake with kind of reducing that savageness that Tarzan had. He had Tarzan getting married in the second novel, for crying out loud. So that kind of took Tarzan off the market as far as fooling around or being able to have some really different adventures. And when Conan came along, here Conan was this the loner hero, the cowboy riding around having adventures, but he could have all kinds of different adventures, and plus Conan, he could drink, and he could swing a sword, and he could fool around with women, and Tarzan couldn't do any of those things. So there was just an aspect of that when you're 16 that has kind of an interest. It might be a prurient interest, but it was an interest.
Now, did you just like the Robert E. Howard stories, or did you like any of the other authors who took over?
Well, excuse me. When I started reading Howard, I had already been reading an awful lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and Burroughs was. I think Burroughs was stuck a little bit with kind of the archaic language of the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and it was more of a romantic type thing. Yeah, and but when Howard came along, Howard had a way of putting words together differently, and plus using different words. That just there was an immediate appeal that I could see that Burroughs, of course, he became an industry unto himself, and he had a kind of a formula for writing, and it worked for him, obviously, because Tarzan is one of the most iconic literary people or literary creations in the world. But after a while, it got to be a little bit tedious. And but with Conan, he came along, and we got to see Conan at all different phases of his life. Doing all kinds of different things. But still very adventuresome and very inventive and very imaginative. And just something that just one of those things that appealed to me, and I liked it, and I kept up with it, and I found out that the rest of Howard's writing was as equally creative and inventive.
What about the other people who wrote what was it, Lynn Carter and all them? Did you like their stories?
Well, in the Lancer series, they had all the the stories written by Carter and L. Sprague de Camp and Bjorn Nyberg and their stories were you could tell right away that you weren't reading a Robert E. Howard story. They lacked the fire that Howard put into every one of his stories, and I read them but I in my mind I kind of set them aside as not the real Conan, and and that's pretty much held up. That held up through all the different pastiches, done in the 80s by guys like Robert Jordan and guys like that.
I was about to say that Robert E. Howard had a very amazing way of describing things. It's like in stories and keeping the action going. It never felt like it ever lagged any time. He definitely had a gift.
Oh, absolutely. He was a storyteller. He was like the skald who sat around the fire and told the stories. He was that guy. And I haven't found anybody that equals him. And I've been a Howard fan for 56 years now. So.
Well, I understand that you also incorporated Conan into when you played Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, absolutely. I discovered Dungeons and Dragons in 1978, and when I first started playing, I realized that holy smokes, here's a game that I can play and pretend that I'm Conan. And other Howard adventurers too. It seemed to work its way, into the playability of D&D, and I knew that Howard had an influence on the creation of D&D because he was listed in the back of the original Dungeon Master's Guide. And the infamous Appendix N, and I did a little, not really research, but it was kind of research. But I've been going to Gen Con, the big game convention, for a long time, and of course Gary Gygax was the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons, and he used to. In the early years, Gen Con was, maybe 1,500 people would show up, and Gary Gygax was always there, and he was very accessible to all the fans. He just kind of hang out and wander around, and so I sat down with him one day at Gen Con, and we just talked about Robert E. Howard, and he told me about how Robert E. Howard was a big influence on the creation of Dungeons and Dragons, and then a few years later, I got to talk to Dave Arneson, who was listed with Mr. Gygax as the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. And I asked him directly. I said, well, what was it about Robert E. Howard that helped you, help create Dungeons and Dragons? And he said, well. I don't know the exact quote here, but he said something along the lines of, "Well, I was watching Godzilla movies and reading Conan books and eating popcorn and doodling on graph paper and that kind of evolved into, the creation of Dungeons and Dragons."
Godzilla and Conan together on graph paper.
That's the magic formula.
So did you create your own character named Conan when you were playing Dungeons and Dragons?
No, I wouldn't blaspheme like that. No, because whatever Conan character that I created, couldn't live up to Howard's creation, or it couldn't live up to the image in my mind. So no, I had my barbarians were more along the lines of named like Grey Wolf or things like that,
Well, no knockoff like Nonan or something like that.
Conan
Yeah, or Nanook, which is Conan backwards, or yeah.
And you also got involved with Howard fandom, and you started writing some articles, some essays, I believe, in a fanzine called Amra. Is that how you say that?
Amra, yeah, Amra was one of the original sword and sorcery fanzines, and it wasn't done like a regular fanzine on a mimeograph or a spirit duplicator. It was printed up professionally, and it was done up right. Elsewhere DeCamp was a big contributor. Lots of Roy Crinkle art. All of the Lynn Carter was a contributor. There were quite a lot of important people in First Fandom that contributed to Amra, and I'd subscribed to that. I saw it somewhere, and I subscribed to it. And this was about the time that the first Conan movie was being made. And back in those days, you could only hear about that through magazines and things like that, periodicals that you didn't really get a whole lot of information. But I heard that there was a Conan movie being made. So my first thought was, wouldn't it be neat if they actually used a Howard story for a Conan movie? Because Howard, he wrote very cinemagraphically. He wrote like he was writing a movie. If you read any of his stories, one of his great talents was using his words to put that story in your mind, and then you let your mind make up all the extra stuff. And but his stories flowed like a movie. So my argument when I wrote him a letter, but they turned it into an essay, and they said, or I said that if they're going to make a Conan movie, why can't they use a story about Robert E. Howard or a story by Robert E. Howard? Use a real Conan story, because but no, of course, with Hollywood, they never, Hollywood will never create a movie with the image that you have in your mind of a particular character. They haven't done it for Tarzan yet, and they haven't done it for Conan. So that was kind of how I introduced myself into Howard fandom.
You just went downhill from that, right?
I got paid a monumental sum of $15 for that article too. So
you got paid?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, $15, man. I thought I was rich.
Then you started reading some of the I guess like the biographies that were written about Robert E. Howard, like The Last Celt. Which is
right. I started picking up on. I had read a lot of the pastiches, and I didn't really care for them all that much. But it was Conan stuff, so that was pretty cool. I like Conan. But there were a number of fanzines that were coming out, and this was in the. This would have been. Well, I had picked up some fanzines in the late '70s, so I kind of knew that there was a Howard fandom out there. But I was married at the time. I had young children, and mowing the grass and all that sort of thing. Yeah, but I started picking up some more of the fanzines, and there were a couple of books that came out. The Last Celt came out. And that's a bio-bibliography of Robert E. Howard. And Glenn Lord, who is the all-time champion of Howard fans, he created The Last Celt, and it had just a ton of information about Robert E. Howard. And I also picked up a book by Don Herron called The Dark Barbarian. And in the back of The Dark Barbarian, there was a listing of something called RHUPA, Robert E. Howard United Press Association, and what that is, it's an apozine. It's a contributor-driven fanzine, pretty much. And they had a listing for a guy there, and so I wrote to him, and he wrote back and said, "Well, you need to get a hold of this guy." And so when I contacted Rusty Burke, I was off and running with Rahuba.
And he was the author, along with Vern Clark, of an article called "The Gents on the Rampage," Savage in the Heart of Texas, and they took a trip to Cross Plains.
They did.
And I guess
that was published in the very first Rahuba that I ever received in the mail. That article was in there, and what they did was it was like a photojournalistic account of their trip to Cross Plains, Texas. Well, at the time, Cross Plains was about 1,000 people. Right now, it's about 1,000 people, but they went there just in particular, to visit the house that Howard lived in, just to kind of poke around. They hadn't really no plans. They didn't really get in touch with anybody. They just kind of showed up. Well, that was fortuitous for a lot of people, because after they published their account, they managed to hook up with some people in Cross Plains who they said, they kind of realized then, I think, that, there might be something to Robert E. Howard having lived here in Cross Plains, because after all, he did create, a character, a literary character that's known all over the world, Conan the Barbarian. Of course, we all like to refer to him as Conan the Cimmerian, because that kind of takes the sting off of the barbarian, But they got in touch with some people there, and then the next year, Rusty went ahead and organized a get together in Cross Plains, and I was lucky enough to. I was smart enough at the time, I guess, to decide, I want to go. I want to do this. I want to try. And hook it up with one of my literary heroes, and see what that was all about. And that's when my Howard education really began, got started, had fun, and as it turns out, of the 10 people that showed up there, Rusty and I are the only ones that are left in Howard fandom. Some of them have passed, but some of them just fell away from Howard fandom, but Rusty and I continued on.
Y'all picked June of 1986 to go. Did y'all pick June because that'd be a bit close to when Robert E. Howard died?
Yeah, pretty much. Although his birthday is January 22nd, and I've been there in Texas on January 22nd, and boy, it's cold. It's nasty. Even though it's in Texas, it's cold, and we picked June, not so much because it's the anniversary of his death, but because the temperature is a little more conducive to showing up there.
And but y'all went to other places too. Y'all first went to like Peaster, which is where Howard was born. That's correct.
Right. Yeah. Our first one of our first stops was Peaster, Texas, which is just basically a wide spot in the road. And we've come to since then we've done more research. I say I'm including a whole bunch of people that really are not me, but they've gone there and they've poked around and everything. And anything that's there was not there when Howard was there. So of course he was only there for a couple of years. But it's just a wide spot in the road. But I've been there, and we all poured whiskey on the ground in honor of Robert E. Howard. And then we moved on, and we took it. That first Texas trip was in 1986, and we toured the area pretty good. We went to another place where Howard had purportedly lived, well, he did live there in the Dark Valley area, but our trip focused, of course, on Cross Plains and his living there, and that was pretty cool.
Is the home where he lived that you first visited, or that you all first visited, is it still there?
Oh, it is. Yeah, actually, it's now the Robert E. Howard Museum.
Good.
In 1980, well, the people of Cross Plains, fortunately, they realized that indeed Howard created an iconic hero, that a literary person that could focus attention on Cross Plains, and they realized that they had something there, so they bought the house. There was a community organization called Project Pride that was formed, and they bought the Robert E. Howard house, and they have since refurbished it to look pretty much like it did when Howard and his mother and father lived there. It looks a lot nicer, I'm sure, than when they lived there. But
when you first arrived in Cross Plains, you had a sign, welcoming y'all to there. Did y'all know that was going to be happening? Did you know you'd be, basically all be like minor celebrities when y'all arrived?
Well, yeah, we Rusty had set everything up, and so they all knew we were coming, and we got treated to a couple of dinners, and it was we had a big reception at the library, the Cross Plains Library, and so we kind of knew that we were, but I, for one, wasn't really expecting to be, a celebrity. And actually, I thought I was hot stuff. I drove 1,000 miles from Indiana to Cross Plains, but we had two guys who came from Switzerland, and then we had another guy who came from Australia. So they were the rock stars of our adventure to Cross Plains, and it's funny because the two fellows from Switzerland, they were Thomas Kovacs and Steve Gallardi, and they were really, really wonderful guys. They were cool, they were European, and they had their funny pants on, and they were styling around, and so we went to one of the dinners that they had for us. We're all there, and we're all being treated like celebrities, and people are asking us about who we are and where we're from, and what the heck are you doing here, and that sort of thing. But the two guys from Switzerland, they would be asked, "Oh, where are you from?" And they'd say, "We're Switzerland. We're from Switzerland." And inevitably, some of the people would then ask, "Well, where's the guy from Australia?" So, they thought they were hot stuff, but they couldn't compare to the guy from Australia. So, rest his soul. That was Graham Flanagan, was from Australia. He passed away about 10 years ago.
And they were all three like big Conan fans, and big enough to come to this thing.
Oh, absolutely. They actually, Thomas Kovacs has done some Howard publishing. He's published several poetry books, several Howard poetry books, and Graham Flanagan was a member of Rahuta, and he did a lot of Robert E. Howard type writing. Steve Gallardi, not so much. He was Tom's friend, but he became a fan, and we saw him a couple more times when he came over here.
Whenever I hear descriptions of Cross Plains, like different podcasts, it seems it gets very disparaged. They almost say it's so desolate. It was no wonder that Robert E. Howard killed himself. I was like, is Cross Plains really that bad?
Well, I can only speak from personal experience. I've been to Cross Plains. Let's see, I've been to Cross Plains about 20 times now. 20, 21, 22, all the Howard days. And the people who cross lanes, the people who like us, they like us just fine. And they're glad we're here. We're glad we're visiting their town. Because at Howard Days, the economy gets really good around Howard Days in Cross Plains. But so the people there, people of Project Pride, they love us. But the people who don't want to have anything to do with us, they don't have anything to do with us. It's pretty much they leave us alone. They don't bother us. They don't drive by and yell out nerds or things like that. So yeah. So that's just fine, and we get along great. Everybody that shows up there is always, we're always on our best behavior, and it works out pretty well.
So I take it the people of Cross Plains are a lot more accepting of Robert E. Howard than they were during his lifetime.
Well, yeah, they are now because, of course, there's a vested interest because Howard brings money into the community, but that's not the real reason. They're happy that they have such a venue as the Howard Museum there now, and they're happy to share it with the entire world. The Howard Museum, it's available any time of the year. You just have to make a phone call and they'll come down and open up the house and show you all around. So I think the people of Cross Plains, like I said, those of them that like us, they really like us. Those of them that don't really care about us, they leave us alone.
Just go and do their own thing. Huh?
Yeah.
And one of the people that you met that first time you went there was Billy Ruth Loving. She was a librarian, and she was a former student of Novelyn Price. Now, did you know who Novelyn Price was at the time when you came? Were you that deep into Howard lore?
Well, we knew about Novelyn later on, a little bit, not that first year. She may have been mentioned. I honestly don't remember. But a few years later, of course, she became more prominent because she wrote a book of her memories with Robert E. Howard, and Novelyn was like I said. Well, I kind of lost my thought there. Sorry.
Did she ever come to the Robert E. Howard days?
She never came to Robert E. Howard days. No, unfortunately, she was living in Lafayette, Louisiana. She had moved there, and she had lived there for a long time. But she did. Let's see, in 1980. I'm trying to think of the Worldcon that she came to a Worldcon, and we had a big. This is 1988. 1988 NOLACon was the Worldcon, and it was in New Orleans, and she came over for that, and she had written her book, One Who Walked Alone, and she was our guest of honor at a luncheon, and she was quite a lady. She came over and she gave a speech. And she sat with all of the fans later on and signed her books, and she was quite a gal.
Did she know how popular Robert E. Howard had become?
Oh yeah, she did, and one of the reasons that she wrote her book was to kind of dispel all the notions that. Howard was crazy, and people who questioned his overzealousness for taking care of his mother, that sort of thing, and she wrote her book to kind of disprove a lot of that because, well, L. Sprague de Camp had written a biography about Robert E. Howard in 83, I think it was. And he, well, he had a lot of opinions, nothing grounded in fact, that Howard was, was a mental case pretty much.
I've heard a lot of controversy over that biography by him.
Uh-huh.
Do you have a high opinion of it?
No, not so much. A lot of the, when DeCamp discusses Howard's writing, obviously DeCamp is one of the better science fiction writers of our generation. However, concerning Robert E. Howard, when he discussed Howard's writing, he was pretty good. It was interesting to listen to, and he had valid points and valid opinions. But he got off into, kind of amateur psychoanalyzing Robert E. Howard, and he had a lot of strong opinions about Howard's life and the way Howard was, and a lot of it is founded in stuff he made up. So most of the serious Howard fans, we discount what Sprague de Camp had to say about Howard's mental state.
So Novelyn Price wrote her like memories of him to kind of counter that, I guess.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and she said that a number of times. She said, well, I don't like what's being written about Bob, and it's being written by people who didn't know him. She knew him, and she kissed him even, so she had to know him pretty well. And she was really upset. It really upset her that people were saying things about him that just weren't true. I think her book pretty much helps discount a lot of the bad things that were being said about Howard.
So I guess it helped to humanize him quite a bit.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It helped to humanize him.
Oh, very definitely. Yeah, it put a real nice spin on his personality about who he really was, and she talked about how he spoke and his manners and his mannerisms, and she really humanized him, and he got that Howard was mentally unbalanced. He got that rap a little too early, I think, and it's taken quite a while, but we've gotten past that, I think.
Going back to your first trip, I guess one of the big treats for y'all was to go to the actual house where Robert E. Howard lived and worked.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was something. The very first trip, it was owned by a man named Floyd Carter, and he wouldn't let us in the house. Unfortunately, inside the house, his wife was sickly, but we got to walk all around the grounds and kind of soak up the atmosphere. And that was a really moving time where you just when you get to walk in the same steps as one of your literary heroes, that's always an important thing, I think.
Y'all like stopped and looked at places where he probably killed himself, and then you also looked for Patches the dog was buried. And I've heard that Patches the dog may not have existed. What is your opinion on that?
Well, we have photographic evidence that Patches existed. So there's at least 4 photographs of Howard with his dog. So you can put that out of your mind. Patches existed. Yeah, he was real.
I heard you describe it. You said it was the most quality moment I had the entire weekend. I was thinking, I'm going, like, especially imagining where he was typing and everything.
Well, there's a spot on the west side of the house where that's where he parked the car and when he got into the car and shot himself. And so the spot is there, and you can stand in that spot. And yeah, that really it brings a lot of things into focus. But it's a very sad moment. It's a very it makes you think, and of course it makes you think, well, what the heck? Why did he do that? And didn't he realize that he had all these people that really liked what he was doing, but he didn't realize that. So sadly, he had to leave us.
Yeah. And then y'all returned to a barbecue. So y'all were really treated like royalty, weren't y'all?
Yeah. That was kind of it was kind of amusing to me, because here I was just a fan who I just started up being a Howard fan with other fans, and they called us a group of international scholars. And it was one of those moments, kind of like where the Three Stooges look around and they turn around and they go, "Who are they talking about?" That's what I did anyway. But yeah, we it was pretty neat to find out that something that you're passionate about, other people can at least support that to some degree, and make it seem like you're important. We were important.
And you got to meet Jack Scott, who was later become a mayor of Cross Plains and also the editor of the Cross Plains Review. And he actually knew Robert E. Howard as a young man. So what was that like?
He did. Jack Scott was one of those larger than life guys, where he was one of those guys where when he walked into the room, he was large and in charge. He had a big booming voice and very personable, and he actually went around to every one of us, and he said and when I introduced myself, he asked me where I was from, and at the time I was living in Rolling Prairie, Indiana, and he said, "Do you know that there's a Cross Plains in Indiana?" And I went, "No, I didn't," and looked it up, and yeah, there's a Cross Plains, Indiana. But he was one of those guys where he he had his stories about Howard. And one of the stories that he told that I thought was just fascinating was how he of course he knew Bob Howard, but he was better friends with Dr. Howard's Bob's dad, and he said one time we were sitting at dinner, and he said at one time that he said. Dr. Howard was afraid of no man, and neither was Robert E. Howard. The only men that they were afraid of was each other. I went, whoa. So that was, I don't know if that was true or prophetic or what have you, but that's what he was one of the ones, he was on the Cross Plains newspaper, and he came down after Howard had shot himself, and so he was right there when Howard did the deed.
Didn't you get to see the final note that Howard left?
There's been a lot of controversy about that. Some people think that it was left in his typewriter, but no, that wasn't true. Dr. Howard found the desk couplet. He found that in Howard's billfold after he had passed, and so Jack Scott didn't see it. There is one account that it was in the typewriter and that Jack Scott saw it. That's not true.
I guess it'd be a good place where you could explain the origin of your nickname, Indy. You want to explain it?
Well, when I at that first Robert E. Howard days, 1986, I had come from Indiana, and I hadn't met any of these people before, but right away, sometimes when you get into a situation where you're not familiar with people, you start to test them, and you start needling them a little bit and see what they give back to you. And so I was giving back as good as I was taking it. So, but at one point, when we were all in a group, we were introducing ourselves, and at some point I had said I had been telling people I'm Bill Cavalier from Rolling Prairie, Indiana, and I said that so much that finally it was I'm Bill Indiana from Rolling Prairie Cavalier, and I had to and so right away everybody jumps on me, and and they're all making fun of me stumbling over trying to say Bill Cavalier from Rolling Prairie, Indiana. And but finally it was Vern Clark who called me Indiana Bill, and I liked that a lot. So it was I liked the Indiana Jones movies. I thought Indiana Bill is a great moniker, so I started using that, and of course that got shortened to Indy, and I got myself a brown fedora, and the rest is history.
And I guess one of the final things y'all did on that first time is y'all went to visit Robert E. Howard's grave.
Oh yeah, we did, and that was probably the most sobering moment of the entire trip. We had gone there. We'd gone there. Actually, we went there twice. And first time we went there, Glenn Lord was with us, and he produced a photograph. And we were looking at the gravestone, and at about 8 feet away from the gravestone, there was a little foot marker. They used to put foot markers on at graves, and it was for Howard's mother, Hester. And so there was a little footstone there. And Glenn Lord produced a photograph of a REH footstone, and it was a photograph of Howard's footstone. And we said, well, let's see if we can find it. So we got our pocket knives and we were cutting the sod, and lo and behold, we found the footstone.
Lovecraft had August Derleth to keep his name alive. Who did Robert E. Howard have as a champion to keep him alive, his name alive after he passed away?
Well, the first, am I getting a call, or are you getting a call? Oh well, whatever. Sorry. The very first guy to keep his legacy alive was probably August Derleth. Of course, Lovecraft did so. He wrote a real nice memoriam piece in the Fantasy Fan, I think it was. And but August Derleth, as you know, is a champion of H.P. Lovecraft. Well, and he put together a book called I can't think of it now. I don't have a copy of it anymore. Anyway, he put together a book of Howard's work. This was in 1947, and it has a lot of Howard stories and poems in it. And oh man, I'm totally blanking on the name of it. It's one of the more important books of. I'll think of it. But at any rate, August Derleth was the guy who took care of that. So he had Howard's name perpetuated in the late 1940s. Well, Glenn Lord read that book and became a fan of Howard's, and pretty much single-handedly started to, he found out that Howard was also a poet. So Glenn decided to investigate this a little more. Glenn lived in near Houston, in Texas, and he decided to put together a big collection of Howard's poems, all the poems that he could find at the time. And so Glenn literally went. He made lots of trips to find people who had copies of Howard's poems, and of course, he wrote to a lot of people who had Howard poems, and so Glenn came out with a collection in '57, I think it was, of it's called "Always Comes Evening," and that was the first collection of Howard's poetry. And it was really Glenn Lord who championed Howard's writing through that time. Sorry, and then in the early '50s, Gnome Press came out with a collection of Howard's stories that were written in Weird Tales, that appeared in Weird Tales. And Sprague de Camp was the editor for that, and there were, let's see, I want to say 7 books in that series, and then and Sprague and Glenn had kept in touch, and then when Sprague started up, when he got the Conan stories to be published by Lancer Books, Lancer Paperbacks, he actually, Sprague wasn't so much a champion of Howard as he was of making money off the Conan stories, which is well and fine because, in 1966 he brought Howard into the mass market publishing. But he kept Glenn Lord in mind, and then when they decided that they needed to form some kind of corporation or something to perpetuate Howard's name, Sprague suggested that Glenn Lord be the executor of the Howard estate. So that's how that all came about. And so Glenn Lord is really the true champion of Robert E. Howard.
So there have been other writers who have been more famous and successful than Howard during his lifetime that fade away into obscurity. So what makes Robert E. Howard stand the test of time?
Oh, it's a good question. To be totally honest with you on that, the Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Cimmerian is a real big reason why Howard is known today. And people who have found the Howard Conan stories and liked them, they also found out that Howard wrote in many different genres. He wrote historical fiction and sports stories, detective fiction, adventure stories, horror stories, all kinds of stuff. And he, oh, thank you. My wife just brought me a cup of coffee. And he, they found out that he could write equally as well as his sword and sorcery type stories.
Going back to that first trip, sounds like that y'all had like a close knit group after that. Some of us hung together. There were a few that did not, but of course, Graham had to go back to Australia, and Tom and Steve had to go back to Switzerland. Interestingly enough, one of the people on that first trip was Nancy A. Collins, and she got her start this would be in the early '90s. She started up a character called Sonia Blue, who was a vampire hunter, and she actually won a Bram Stoker Award for her work there. So she became a novelist, and she also became a comic book writer.
and she had a real long stint on Swamp Thing, and she's doing some more comics now. So everybody Google Nancy A. Collins and find out that I don't know. I don't know if she's going to admit it, but she was along on that very first Robert E. Howard trip, so she has a bit of notoriety, a bit of fame there. Anyway, she's well known to people who like comics, that's for sure. But for the most part, I started. I caught up with Rusty and Vern Clark. They became pretty good friends. But for the most part, that first group, and we didn't really hang out. We just had the notoriety of being that first group to come to Robert E. Howard days.
So was this the birth of the Robert E. Howard days? Did y'all decide to do this every year?
Well, that came a little bit later. We after that first Robert E. Howard days, the Project Pride people, what they decided to do was every year on the anniversary of his death there, they for the first 5-6 years, they would have a little barbecue out in the yard or at the house, or they would have like an ice cream social or a luncheon or something, just to honor Howard, and a little bit of fundraising, but mostly they did. They bought the house and made the museum on their own dime, and eventually people started to contribute and make it more so. But the real Robert E. Howard days, well, they didn't get started until I think 91 was 91. We had Howard Remembrance Day, and Billy Ruth Loving was the librarian there, and she had suggested, why not have like a couple of panels or something, just like a big group discussion. So we started on that, and then ever since then we've built on it, and it's become what it has today.
What did you learn about Robert E. Howard on that trip that you didn't know before?
Well, there's a lot of little things that you're going to learn, and you learn things about how how he lived, maybe what his life was like at the house, and the places where he went in Cross Plains, and little things like when Howard wrote his stories, he wrote the stories excuse me, out of a little room in the house. And of course, in the summertime, he had to have the windows open because it was very hot. And Howard used to read aloud as he typed. He would, actually read what he had written, but I guess he was very loud about it. And one of the things we learned was that the next door neighbors who were the butlers, apparently at one point he was so loud that the neighbor lady next door, complained about all the noise. And supposedly Mother Howard screamed out the window, said, "You be quiet too, my boy is working." so that, having your mom defend yourself when you having your mom defend you when you're writing tales of Conan the Barbarian, that must have been something.
Don't want to mess with Conan's mom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You later wrote an essay called "How Robert E. Howard Saved My Life." So,
for sure.
How did he save your life exactly?
Well, about the time that the first Howard days was happening, my marriage had pretty much gone south, and I was in kind of a bad place, and that's when I decided to join Rahutha, and just because I thought it would be a nice little activity for me to indulge in. You know, I had always drawn, and I could write a fairly well. And when Rusty suggested that we get together in Texas, well, that was about the point where the marriage had really much gone sour. So I decided I think I'm going to go to Texas. So I did, and just meeting all these like-minded people, and people who there was a fellowship there, almost an immediate fellowship, and and after I got back, of course, then we got divorced and all that, and that's always some trauma there. And about the same time I had changed jobs, and I was out of work for a while, and so things weren't looking too good for old Indy. But I had my Howard friends to just to give me that boost, give me a little bit of hang in there, that sort of thing. And and there's a lot of other factors too, but that was the main one. And they really helped me get through a troubling time in my life. And for that reason, I give Bob Howard credit for saving my life, because I would have never known these guys if it wasn't for Robert E. Howard.
When it comes to you won an award for that essay in 2007.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was as big a surprise as I've ever had. I won the Hyrcanian Award, I think it was, from actually Leo Grin was doing the Sumerian magazine at the time, and he had awards every year for different categories of in Howard fandom, and I won for best essay for how Robert E. Howard saved my life, and boy, you could have knocked me over with a feather, I'll tell you, because I've always thought of myself as being more known as an artist, as a Howard artist, and when I won an award for an essay, that just really floored me. But I'll take it.
I'm surprised at how big the fandom is for Robert E. Howard. I didn't realize how big it was, and so it seemed like there's quite an active little community going on with Robert E. Howard fans.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
I was quite surprised at how big the fandom is for Robert E. Howard.
Oh yeah.
And
well, Howard fandom is I don't think that Howard fandom is as big as Lovecraft fandom. If I was going to compare something, mainly because we're not as organized, maybe, but in order to to celebrate Robert E. Howard's life, we have to go to Central Texas, and at the hottest time of the year, and it's in a tiny little town, and there's not a lot of, it can be oppressive sometimes when you're wandering around in the hot Texas heat, as opposed to, say, with Lovecraft, with Necronomicon, which is a real convention. Howard Days is not a real convention. Howard Days is more like a big family reunion. We gather mostly outside. We have hot dog lunches and barbecues, and we all sit around and talk about Robert E. Howard and other stuff too. But it's not. You have to be a pretty hardcore Howard fan to come to Cross Plains. But there are many Howard fans, literally all over the world, and of course with Howard, it's kind of more. There are probably 10 times more Conan fans as there are Howard fans, maybe even 20 times more. But that's okay because Robert E. Howard created Conan, and without Robert E. Howard, there would be no Conan, so you wouldn't be a fan of him, so you wouldn't be connected with Robert E. Howard. So it's that circle there that I'm okay with.
For those who haven't read Conan, is there like a particular order you need to read the stories in, or you can just pick up any one?
Well, when Howard talked about writing the Conan tales, he talked about how, this is written down somewhere, so I'm not making it up. He talked about how it was like Conan was standing at his shoulder, just relating his stories as they came to mind. Whenever we talk amongst ourselves and we're talking about stories about, oh yeah, I remember this one time that this happened. And then your next time you remember something, it might be something that happened 10 years before that or 10 years after that. So that's kind of what Howard did with his Conan stories. The very first Conan story, Conan is a king. And I think the third one, Conan is 17 years old and he's a thief. So Howard didn't pay too much attention to the chronology of his character, but he sure busted out some pretty good stories.
There was one story called People of the Dark, which mentions Conan's name. Is that regarded as canon by Conan fans?
Well, it's, people think of that as maybe a precursor to the Conan stories, kind of like, it was something that Howard did years before, and he may have drawn upon that story, to bring it into the Conan's world or Conan's milieu, maybe, but he didn't really. It wasn't really set up as a Conan the Cimmerian story. It was just a use of the name. But even though it was still an adventure story about a barbarian type, but it's not really a Conan story, not considered a Conan story.
He's known for other characters too. There's like Cole the Conqueror and Solomon Kane. Do you have a favorite of one of his other characters?
Well, of his other characters, Conan is my favorite character, and he always will be my favorite literary character of all time. But my second favorite Robert E. Howard character is Francis X. Gordon, El Borak, who was a displaced Texan who had adventures in Afghanistan in the early part of the 1900s. I absolutely adore those stories because it's Howard. He's writing in a contemporary. Actually, it's a scenario that's contemporary to him because he mentioned in one of the stories. It talks about World War I, and he talks about who's the guy who was running around the desert, man. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're talking about Lawrence, T.E. Lawrence.
Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, and Lawrence of Arabia makes an appearance in one of the El Borak stories. So Howard was writing a contemporary type of story, and he had guns and cannons and all kinds of good stuff. But he was still writing him in that adventure sense of the early 1900s, where there was, a lot going on and a lot of bold adventurer, and brave guys, so El Borak has an appeal for me too. El Borak was a displaced Texas gunfighter who wound up in Afghanistan, kind of like a soldier of fortune, but it was I've always thought that the Billy Jack character was a lot like El Borak, where, it just, whenever there's a time of trouble and there's nobody around to help you out, all of a sudden El Borak appears. But I like. I'm sorry.
There's another character. There's another.
Well,
character.
I like. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's another character that Robert E. Howard he didn't create, but it was inspired by one of his characters, Red Sonja.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
How do you feel about her?
Well, are you talking about the current Red Sonja of the comic books and
the comic
Bridget
books.
Nielsen and all? Yeah. Well, that's a character actually created by Roy Thomas, and the Red Sonja of the comic books is something that Roy Thomas created and put it in the Conan universe. But the real Red Sonja that Howard wrote about was it was a historical adventure that he wrote. I can't think of the name of the story, but it involves Red Sonja of Rogatino, and it's the storming of Vienna in the 1500s. And she's this real, she's a real tough chick who's fighting alongside of the men and all. And that was the inspiration for the Red Sonja of the comics, but they're totally different characters.
That was from the Shadow of the Vulture, from that story.
Shadow of the Vulture, that's it. Yep, thank you.
And so for Robert E. Howard Days, it's going to be coming up soon. What are some of the things people can expect, for this year?
Well, this year, what we're doing is we like to theme Howard Days every year to some degree. And this year, well, we've got we're doing a theme of Robert E. Howard's influence on gaming. Not only like things like Dungeons and Dragons, but there are a number of board games out now, Conan and Solomon Kane board games. And of course, there's all the video games, Conan Exiles and all that. And Howard has had a huge influence on the creation of a lot of those games because they're using his characters. Excuse me. And but one of the other themes this year is the 90th anniversary of the first Conan story. First Conan story was in November of 1932, The Scarlet Citadel. And it's also the 90th anniversary of what a lot of people consider to be Howard's masterpiece work, Worms of the Earth. It's a Brian McMorran story. And that's a wonderful story there. And it's also the 90th anniversary of Howard's famous poem called Samaria. And Samaria was written in early 1932. And a lot of people think that that's kind of what got Howard thinking about writing about Conan. And the anniversaries continue. Is also the 40th anniversary of the Conan the Barbarian movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so we're going to have panels on all of those subjects. Along with all the regular activities that go on at Howard Days, we have tours of the house. We have docents in every room that tell you a little something about the room, about the house as you walk around the rooms. And there's a souvenir postal stamp that a cancellation stamp that you can get at the post office. And the Robert E. Howard Foundation Awards are going to be announced then. And we're going to have a hot dog lunch, and we have a banquet. 160 people at the banquet. We also have a silent auction, which is really cool because people gather up Howard items, and we have a big auction, a big silent auction, and all that benefits, of course, Project Pride. And we have the barbecue on Saturday, and then one of the things that we've been doing for a number of years now is we call it Porchlight Poetry, where we have an open mic and we read Robert E. Howard poetry right off the porch of his house, which is, to my mind, incredibly cool. really nerdy, but man, it's incredibly cool. And what we do every year is we take the poem Samaria, which is one of his more famous poems, and we read it in different languages. So, and so far, let's see, we're up to, I think, about 10 languages now. And we have people coming in from all over the world, and so they can read it in different languages, which is pretty cool. You know, if you've never heard Samaria read in Irish Gaelic, well, there's nothing like it, I'll tell you. You don't really understand it, but you kind of do. And of course, the biggest thing about Howard Days for us Howard fans is we have Howard Fellowship. Everybody that's there is there for one reason, and that's to celebrate the life and legacy of Robert E. Howard. And we all get together in friendship, and there's much discussion to be had. And after hours, there's occasional adult beverage imbibing at the pavilion. And it's just, I call it the best 2 days in Howard fandom. And it's just a great get together. It's much fun for everybody.
Or even something they're called like Fists at the Ice House.
We do, yeah. One of the panels is called that, Fists at the Ice House, and that's done by Mark Finn, who has written a biography of Howard. It's called Blood and Thunder, and so he's one of our Howard scholars, but he's also a big fan of Howard's boxing stories. Now, Robert Howard wrote more boxing stories than any other type of story that he wrote. And a lot of the stories are, well, he writes some straight up boxing stories, but I think his forte in that was his funny, we call them funny boxing stories, where he has created a couple of characters, one of which is called, his name Steve Costigan. And it's just about his adventures of, you know, sailing the South Seas on a tramp steamer, and he's got his bulldog Mike with him. And every time he sets into port, you know, there's always some boxing involved, but there's always some, you know, he's not the brightest bulb in the lamp. So, you know, he'll get hoodwinked by a nefarious a promoter, or some girl will come along and you know, take his money and that sort of thing. But they're rollicking good fun, and they're laugh out loud stuff. But Mark Finn is devoted to Howard's boxing stories, and so he sets up a little program. It's just a little 1 hour panel that we do, but he does it right on the slab behind the old ice house, which this is a place where Robert E. Howard actually boxed. Howard was actually engaged in you know, kind of like the backroom fisticuff fights, you know, amateur boxing at the ice house. You know, it was cool in the ice house because they had ice covered up with straw, and Howard would actually fight there.
I saw a video with Mark Finn giving that presentation. I was really impressed by it. I didn't know really anything about his boxing stories, but after it was over with, I became a fan of him. I wanted to start reading some of them because he does a really good
Excellent,
job.
yeah. Oh, you definitely should, because it's kind of the antithesis of Conan stories, because Conan can be kind of grim and serious sometimes, but and you wouldn't think that a guy who could write, you know, like Howard does with some of his adventure stories, to be really a laugh out loud type comedy writer, you know, where he's just the way he phrases the stories, and you know, things like, he hit me so hard I was looking down my own spine. Well, that's you got hit pretty hard then, I think. But you know, just little things like that just make you just make you wonder, how good could this guy be? Yeah, he's something. But Mark, Mark puts on a real good program, and of course he's an entertainer himself. He's done acting and radio plays and all that, so he really gets into it, and he really makes it entertaining for everybody, entertaining and educational.
Now, there was a documentary done about the Robert E. Howard days called Barbarian Days.
Yeah.
I've tried
Oh
looking
yeah.
for that.
Have you seen that?
I've not seen it. I can't find a copy of it anywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to find. I think I don't know why, but that was done in 2009. I think. Yeah, 2009. And they followed around Rusty Burke, Mark Finn, Chris Gruber, and me. And it kind of captures what goes on at Howard Days, but I don't know. I have some personal reasons for not thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced cheese.
Not a fan.
Yeah, well, not really, because they kind of, they kind of let us on, and then when you see it, you'll see there's one part where instead of going to the source or anything, they animate a particular kind of an altercation that one of us had at Howard Days, and it just I don't know. I don't want to speak too ill of it, at least not here.
We'll jump on to
catch me. Catch me at Howard Days, and I'll tell you all about it.
I understand there was an archaeological dig also at the Robert E. Howard house.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Y'all had an archaeological dig at the Robert E. Howard house.
Oh, we did. Yeah. That was in 2018. We were in touch with the sons of the former owner. Let's see, there was Roy Carter and his brother Floyd, I think. Yeah, Floyd. And anyway, they had let us know that they moved into the house in the middle 1970s, and they had let us know that they when they cleaned out the house, when they bought the house, they cleaned it out, and there was a big pit in the backyard that they threw all the junk in. Well, according to the Floyd brothers, or the Carter brothers, there was a sign. Well, we've all seen a sign on the front of the house when Howard lived there, and it said Dr. Howard Residence, because Howard's dad was a doctor, and they needed to notate the house. And one of the Carter brothers remembers throwing that sign into the pit. And so, of course, that perked up our ears about that. So Jeff Shanks, who was a real archaeologist, he was able to pull some strings and have his team come in, and we did an archaeological survey of the house, and then we dug in a few places. I actually got involved in this. I went down for that. That was fun. And what we found was an old like a cold cellar, and it was off the back of the house. And we dug down, and it was lined with bricks, and we found there were shelves there, and there were most of the jars that were in there were broken, and anything in there was gone forever. But we did find a couple of jars in there, and there was some kind of nameless black mud inside one of the jars. And so we did find something in the backyard, but we never found the sign. But there may be some more stuff underground there, but we'll probably never know, because I think that's the only time they're going to do that.
Understood.
And after we took float, I'm sorry.
I understood you found a battle axe there.
Yeah, it was a battle axe that was about an inch high, and it was a little piece of machinery that looked like a battle axe. It wasn't really a battle axe. Well, we were hoping, we found they found some old coins and stuff, and but nothing really that would lead to maybe when the Howards lived there at all. Maybe that nameless black substance in the jar was, at one time it could have been like a jar of beans or something, canned beans. I don't know. But it was interesting because you never know what you're going to find, I guess.
Sounds like the beginning of a story. Find a jar of this black mystery substance. That Robert E. Howard would have written about.
Yeah, really. Yikes.
And you've done artwork, and I think you've also had some artwork appear. Did I read this right? Nights at the Dinner Table. You in that?
Oh yeah. Well, my Howard artwork. I'll talk about that first. I was lucky enough I got picked to do the Robert E. Howard Foundation Press has published a series of 22 books. What we did there was we got all of Howard into print. So pretty much, I think it's about 98% of everything that Howard ever wrote is in print now. Well, some of the books are out of print, but we got it all published, and I got to do the cover for the Pictures in the Fire volume, and that was pretty cool. I like doing that. I just did 3 portraits of Robert E. Howard on the cover, and I had fun doing that. And I also I draw cartoons for Nights of the Dinner Table. I have a monthly gaming cartoon there, and that's a claim to fame, I guess.
This is a Lovecraft show. We'll mention about him and Lovecraft are friends. They both seem to be cat lovers. And Lovecraft gave him his famous nickname.
Two Gun Bob.
And
yeah, everybody knew who he was talking about when he said Two Gun Bob.
And he wrote his own Cthulhu mythos. Howard did.
He did.
So he's like,
he wrote a few. I think that, I don't know if it's overstated, but he did borrow a few things. Probably Howard's best known Cthulhu, the mythos tale, is probably The Black Stone, which is just a marvelous horror novel, a horror story. And and of course Howard slipped a little bit of the mythos into a number of his stories. Back in the day, I found this out a couple of years ago. Back in the day, writers like Howard and Lovecraft and a lot of others, they would send their stories around to the other writers just to have them, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm working on, and they would comment on them. And I'm sure because Howard admired Lovecraft so much that he was only happy to borrow a little bit from the mythos tales.
Yeah, they seem to borrow from one another. I know that Lovecraft mentions one of the characters in Whisper in the Darkness, and they contributed together on a round robin story called The Challenge from Beyond.
Right, yeah.
That's an interesting story because, Lovecraft, he has like this protagonist is like, kind of a typical Lovecraft protagonist where he kind of like faints, and then Robert Howard takes over and he becomes like a swashbuckler.
Yeah, guy starts swinging his fist. Yeah, that's that pretty much says all you need to know about the difference between Howard and Lovecraft.
And there are at least two bands that are named after one of Conan's adversaries. Is it Thulsa Doom? As they say his name?
Thulsa Doom.
Thulsa Doom. One's a Norwegian heavy metal band, and another one's from New York. So it's like a Conan. I mean, Conan's still popular, all around the world, and he's been adapted as TV series, cartoons, and games. So, do you have like a favorite adaptation of him, like a cartoon or TV series?
Well, surprisingly enough, I've never seen the cartoon series. And I never saw the TV series. It wasn't Howard, so I didn't really care about it. The adaptation that I like the best, of course, are the 24 issues that Barry Windsor Smith did for Marvel Comics. Big fan of Barry Windsor Smith, and the adaptations that Roy Thomas did were pretty darn good, and even Roy's original stories about Conan were pretty darn good. But the movies, first two, excuse me, first two movies. Well, I didn't like the first one because I wrote an article about why it should be Robert E. Howard's story, and they didn't pay any attention to me. So the heck with them. And the second one, I like the second Conan the Destroyer. I like that a whole lot because I didn't go into it with any involvement. I knew there was nothing Robert E. Howard had to do with it. So I went into it with just, hey, this is a comic book movie. Let's have some fun. And that's exactly what they did. It was a great, great comic book movie. And then when...
You like that one?
I'm sorry?
Did you like the third Conan movie that was made with Jason Momoa?
I like Jason Momoa as Conan. The look was there. I think he looked like Conan. But, the story, oh God, good Lord. Yikes. It was, I fail to understand again why writers in Hollywood think that something like the third Conan movie was better than anything that Robert E. Howard ever wrote. They could have adapted, a Howard story so easily, and they didn't, and they came up with that crap. So, well, I like I said before, there's no way that Hollywood is ever going to give me or a lot of people, they're not going to give me my image of Conan on the big screen. So, I take with it. I take it for what it's worth, and for what it's worth is that all three of those movies, Conan the Barbarian, people wanted to find out more about Conan the Barbarian, so they checked it out. They found Robert E. Howard. So in the end, Robert E. Howard has won. He's not more famous than Conan, but he's famous because of Conan.
Let's just say Hollywood decided to make a fourth one. They decided to use you as a consultant. What would you advise for them?
I would advise them to, first of all, if there was a Conan movie, hey, read all of these Conan stories and then pick one and make a movie out of it, because all you need for a movie is right there on with Howard's words. Howard, like I said, Howard writes cinematography. He writes like you can see it up on the screen. That would be, I can't imagine, a writer in Hollywood who reads a Howard story, a Conan story, and then he goes, that's okay, but I can do better. I can come up with something better. Yeah, okay. No, let's take a big ship and put it on land and then roll it around like in the third Conan movie. What the heck is oh, good Lord. So man, and all that stuff about young Conan where he fights the Picts in the woods and he's still got the egg and the egg hasn't broken in his mouth. Oh, good Lord, what a bunch of crap.
I've forgotten that. How to forget that.
My opinion, of course.
There were other movies that were based on Howard's works, like Kroll and Solomon Kane. Did you watch any of them?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen them both. And again, why make up your own stories about these characters when they're right there? Good Lord. If you could make a movie about, the original sword and sorcery story is the Shadow Kingdom. It's a Kull story. You can make a marvelous movie right out of that. But no, they had to pick Hercules and have him, whatever he did. I've only seen it once. It was so bad. Oh God, I couldn't believe it. And Solomon Kane, if there wasn't named Solomon Kane, there was some other character. If it was Bruce the Puritan, and it would have been a pretty good movie because it was a well-made movie and had a lot of nice effects and it was good stuff. But if you read any Solomon Kane, that's not Solomon Kane's not going to hell. He's not. He's not going to fight the devil. Come on. So again, my opinion.
And there's one other movie, The Whole Wide World, which is basically by Howard and Price. Which thing of that movie?
Oh, it's a marvelous movie. A lot of people have come to Howard because of that movie too. It's a really accurate depiction of Novelin Price's book. But of course, we have to remember that Novelin's book was not a biography of Howard. It was her remembrances of Robert E. Howard. And so it was totally slanted from her viewpoint. And but they captured it so very well in the movie. And I think the actors in that movie did just such a fantastic job. And it's a very, it gives you, I think it gives you a good understanding of Robert E. Howard because Novelin's book gave you a really good understanding of who Robert E. Howard was. So yeah, that movie, big thumbs up.
So is that the best of them all for you?
I'm sorry?
Is that the best of them all for you? For the Robert E. Howard type?
Oh yeah, out of all the Howard / type movies, yeah. Oh yeah, that's and it didn't hurt that I got to meet Novelin a couple of times. I even spent time in her house, so she was a marvelous woman. So.
Is it true that Dark Agnes, the character Howard created, was based on her?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
I read it online.
Maybe
true.
It maybe it could have been. I don't know. I've often thought there's a couple of in the El Barak stories that Howard wrote. He wrote those about the time that he was going out with Novelin, and there's a couple of plucky heroines in the El Barak stories that kind of remind me of the way Novelin was. She was very forthright, and she didn't mince words, and you always knew where you stood with her. But she was the teacher that you didn't want, but that you ultimately ended up loving.
Marvel Comics has been kind of like updating like a Conan, and they've made him an Avenger and everything. So, what do you think of the modern take of like a Conan in comic books?
I guess Marvel just lost the license just like last week. But yeah, they're finishing up their King Conan stories. But how do I like them? Man, I love them. Conan and the Savage Avengers. Holy crap. That's great comic book stuff. It is just so cool, that Conan is hanging out with all the Marvel heroes. I absolutely loved it. And in the Conan itself, the Conan comic books themselves, one of the things I really liked about that is in the back of all of them, they print the stories. They actually, they do the text stories right in the back of the comics. And
you talking about the Blaze comics?
I'm sorry?
The ones that are done by Blaze Comics, where they read.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Blaze is doing that. Yeah, but talk about what a great way to bring Howard right to people who are reading a comic book. You got the story right there, and you can read it there and compare the adaptation. I think the Blaze adaptations have been really good.
Enjoyed them.
Pretty faithful. Well, yeah, pretty faithful, and of course, with comic books, you got to come up with all kinds of dialogue that the characters have to say, while they're doing their actions. Excuse me, but I still, the good thing about that, even with the Marvel comics, they bring people to Robert E. Howard.
There was one other story that he wrote that he's probably like most known for, and it's probably considered his best horror story, Pigeons from Hell.
Oh yeah.
I hate the title of it. It seems like it's a little misleading, but it's a great story.
Yeah, well, there are pigeons at the beginning and at the end, but Stephen King called Pigeons from Hell one of the finest horror stories of the 20th century. And I guess he would know a little bit about that. But yeah, Pigeons from Hell, what a great horror story. Whoa. Yeah, Howard, when Howard would write in a contemporary setting, I think that made Pigeons from Hell even more horrific, because he's writing about the very day that you're reading it, and you're going, whoa, this could maybe happen, So, but yeah, Howard and Zimbabwe's and all kinds of neat things. Axe to the head, all that good horror story stuff.
It's got some good elements to it. Do you have any other stories that you want to talk about?
Well, I like a lot of the El Barak stories. They're just rousing good adventures. I like a lot of the Conan stories. I like most of the Conan stories. The story that I'd like to talk about is Worms of the Earth. I've often considered Worms of the Earth to be Howard's masterpiece, as far as there's sword and sorcery to it, but it's just horror, stark horror of what Bran Mac Morn unleashes on the Roman legions. It just, and when you read it, I just read it last week, and it's so finely crafted, and it's like Howard, he made a meticulous choice of every word that he used, and he crafted such a marvelous story there. It's historical horror, it's gothic horror. It's just, when you start to think about the nameless horrors that Bran Mac Morn has unleashed, and it even makes Brand McMorran a little bit crazy. So Worms of the Earth is just man, what a magnificent story.
What about Skullface?
Can't say enough good things about that.
What about Skullface?
Skullface, some of the like the detective type stories or the horror, that's another contemporary story. I don't care for those as much. I've read them, but I haven't really dwelt on them. I've always considered them to be kind of a lesser faction of Howard's writing.
Okay, I usually explore a word in the program, and I thought for this word we picked something from Robert E. Howard, Hyborian. You care to define that word for our public?
Hyborian. Well, it's a world that Howard created to pretty much to give his Conan stories in particular more authenticity. With the Hyborian age that Howard created, he gave validity to those stories because he created an actual history of what happened. This was 10,000 years ago. This is what happened, and this is how the continents developed, how the countries developed, how all of the peoples that populate the countries developed, and it gave the Conan stories more of a solid ground to spring up from. When you've got a history to draw upon, I think it's easier to write chronological stories.
I guess that was his Bible that he went to, when he was he was writing his Conan stories.
I'm sorry, say that again.
That was his. I guess that was his Bible that he went to, to consult for his Conan stories. Exactly.
Yeah. He had everything set up as far as placement of the countries and the types of people and the environments and that sort of thing. So yeah, he did use it and drew upon it, and that's what makes the Conan stories, even though it's fantasy fiction, sword and sorcery, historical fantasy, whatever you want to call it, it makes them seem more real.
I guess we'll wrap it up right now. David, Richard,
right.
and the rest. I see the stars are no longer right. We must cease all discussions till they align again next month. 30 plus minutes of H.P. Lovecraft is sponsored by the Conan O'Brien Days. This podcast is created in association with LovecraftPod.com and Logan Speculative Fiction Group, with the help of Lovenkind Public Library and the Great Old Ones. Special thanks to Katie Tyson for making us sound better than we look, Joshua Dukes for the podcast he refuses to do, and Sam Orndorff for his Howardian knowledge and his work as a stunt double. Until we meet again, may you avoid the slumber party of Princess Cthulhu and Ballet.